The establishment of free trade agreements can be a critical and progressive step towards great economic integration and continues to become more valuable in an increasingly globalized world. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is EDCA and beyond. Is trade the way out of the debt trap? Where are we really moving? What is happening with regard to EDCA? We saw just last week that there were fresh discussions with the government of India. Will the document be signed in the next few months? How transparent is the process? Is this the way out? To discuss all this and more, we have with us four individuals in our studios today, eminent personalities who have joined us before as well. Among them are Mr. K.J. Veerasinghe, Advisor, Agency for International Trade, representing the government. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Veerasinghe. Nice to have you on board today.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Also joining us this evening is Mr. Nalaka Jayavira, representing the United Professionals Movement. Joining us this evening is Professor Rohan Samarjiva, Chair of Learn Asia. Nice to have you on board as well, Professor Samarjiva, today again. And also joining us this evening is Mr. Rohan Maskorala, CEO of the Shippers Academy of Sri Lanka. Nice to have you on board as well, Mr. Maskorala, after a lapse of a few months.
Yes, thank you.
Starting off, let's start off today's debate, today's discussion with Professor Rohan Samarjiva. Professor, what is the Economic and Technology Cooperation Agreement? What is EDCA?
It's a bilateral trade agreement that will improve and build upon the trade in goods agreement that we've had with India since 1998 or 2000 when it came into effect. It will include hopefully more dispute resolution provisions, mutual recognition agreements to improve the functioning of the goods chapter, and it will include a chapter on services, I understand, as is the case with all trade agreements nowadays. There will also be a chapter or section on investment, and there will be one on technological cooperation. So it's a comprehensive trade agreement.
Is it a reason to worry, Professor? People are worried about EDCA. Many organizations have voiced their concerns, saying it is another SEPA that is coming into play in the guise of EDCA. Is it so?
I personally thought there was nothing wrong with SEPA, so I wouldn't worry about that anyway. The issue is there are some people who do not like trade agreements because they think that the government and the politicians in power should have the discretion to take whatever decisions they want, and they should be they should be free to change their minds. What trade agreements do is that it constrains the vacillation and the policy uncertainty of politicians being allowed to change their minds. Secondly, I think there is a real issue in Sri Lanka, which is sort of built into the genes of our people, which is that we don't want to do any kind of agreements with India. This goes back to the 12th century and the Chola invasions. So trade agreements, some people are opposed to trade agreements. Some people are opposed to trade agreements with India, but not with other countries. The reality is that our exports have dropped, as everybody knows. As a percentage of our GDP, exports are quite low now. And if you look at competitive countries, comparable countries like Vietnam, Vietnam has since about 2004, when all these things stopped, Vietnam has increased its exports ninefold, 9 times, right? We have increased our exports only twofold. And Vietnam has been, which is run by a communist country, which places great emphasis on national sovereignty. Vietnam has been signing agreements left and right. They are perhaps one of the countries with the highest number of trade agreements. They are in fact party to the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They are also party to the alternative to TPP. If TPP doesn't happen, there will be something called RCEP, which is the ASEAN Plus agreement. They will be party to that. So when we look at competitive industries, apparel industries, business process outsourcing, all these industries, all these firms that are competing with our companies, they will be at an advantage because Vietnam would have signed these agreements, would have lowered tariffs, would have got legal provisions regarding travel, movement of people, mutual recognition agreements, various kinds of things, and we would be outside the developing trade
Professor, you spoke about the TPP. However, recently we saw during the American election debate, presidential election debate, Donald Trump criticizing the TPP, and Hillary Clinton, who was the opponent, the Democratic candidate, did not really oppose his thoughts or moves at the debate. Seems like TPP is not the way out.
President Obama is still pushing for TPP, but it's very simple. If the United States does not ratify the TPP, the winner will be China. China has already got a regional economic cooperation agreement signed with everybody who has signed, were in process with everybody who has signed agreements with ASEAN, and that one will include India, it will include China, it won't include us, and it won't include the United States, it won't include Canada, and so on. So I think it will be the United States' loss and China's gain.
Professor, you speak saying very optimistically about trade agreements. However, Sri Lanka has only signed 2. Why is that?
Well, that is the reason why we are in trouble, aren't we? We had a trade agreement, we made some progress on that, but even that trade agreement, it was a, what I would call a, you know, when you go on bicycles with training wheels, little kids go on bicycles with training wheels, it's a trade agreement with training wheels. Because we have so many things on the negative list that we kept out of it, right? So it was okay to start with, but it had to be improved. It was not good as it was not good enough. And then we decided to freeze all trade negotiations. No movement on trade agreements from about 2008. While all other countries in the world had realized that Doha or the multilateral process was not moving, there was no forward momentum, they went around, they were doing a lot of trade agreements. I can remember talking to the Indian trade officials at that point, they were not very advanced. But now I'm sure they are very much more experienced because everybody has been signing trade agreements because people are getting ready for a world where the WTO will not matter as much as it did.
Thank you very much, Professor Rohan Samarjeva, Chair of Learn Asia. We are now in conversation with Mr. Rohan Maskorala, CEO of the Shippers Academy. Mr. Maskorala, are you as bullish as Professor Samarjeva on EDCA? Do you think that free trade agreements are the way out for a country like Sri Lanka?
I fully agree with Professor Samarjeva. I am a pro-trade agreement person. After all, what are we trying to achieve? We are trying to make this country a hub for various sorts, whether it is financial, shipping, logistics, manufacturing. Without trade agreements, who's going to come to this country to invest? Because we need to get market access. I'm glad that the government is negotiating with Singapore. Forget about the ITCA first. They're negotiating with Singapore, they're negotiating with China. They should negotiate with the United States before going into TPP, in my personal belief. Right? They should go into trying to negotiate with United Kingdom. Right? Sri Lanka, if we have to be a hub, we cannot give in to protectionist continuously. Okay, if there's reasonable argument, reasonable points put on, I think the government is willing to listen. And we started the Indo-Lanka with a lot of protests at that time, the 1998, I think originally there were a lot of protests. So we have moved forward, we should move further forward. And I think EDCA is a direction, it's the right direction to move forward.
Mr. Maskorala, if EDCA is the way forward, if that is the right direction the government should take, why are they hiding the document?
I don't think they are hiding the document as
what
such.
Are they doing then?
Well, in the sense, this, as it was clearly mentioned, I think these negotiations cannot be in public. Negotiations never happen in public. Consultations never happen in public. Let them come out with the final drafts. Then it will come to Parliament and the discussion will be in the public. Then people can take, this chapter is wrong, this is right, this is wrong, the opinions can be formed. But without every negotiation, if I come to do a negotiation with, I can't tell the whole world that this is what I am going to negotiate with you. That's not going to work. That's not a practical way of doing things. I think even within a corporate system, when board of directors negotiate with another corporate, you don't tell the whole staff that this is what we are going to do. That's even in the small way it doesn't happen. So we got to understand the nitty-gritty of a government to government negotiation and how it works. So people, I think this is, people are trying to put some kind of a scary thing in front, saying it's not out. It will be out.
When will it be out?
I don't know. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. They will come to public discussion at some point. I do not know the time frames because I am not involved directly in any kind of negotiations. I am sure Mr. Veerasinghe can tell more about that.
You spoke of creating hubs. The government has a vision to create Sri Lanka as a hub. But who should really decide this? Is it the people concerned or is it the government concerned?
Well, the government must put the policies into right direction. Now, the best example, I always come here and talk about Dubai. The ruler of Dubai put the policies right so that investments come in. The business environment of the country is free to do business. Money can come in, money can go out. That's kind of operation that hubs have. The freedom to do business. The biggest example we are citing is Singapore. So we have to study some things of the Singapore model that will suit Sri Lanka because there is a geographic advantage. Now ITCA is a two-way thing, right? It's a two-way bilateral. So we are talking of a $2.7 trillion economy growing at 7%, beating Japan in 15 years with a population of 1.5 billion people. Now, is it a market for us or is the 20 million a market for them? For them, Sri Lanka would be a good service center.
Do we have the right policy, Mr. Maskorala?
I believe we are putting the right policies by doing these things. Otherwise, we can't be scared of protectionist and go forever. We will be at the same level which we were 20 years ago if we have to listen to protectionists continuously.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rohan Maskorala, CEO of the Shippers Academy of Sri Lanka. I now move my attention to Mr. Nalaka Jayavira, United Professionals Movement. Mr. Jayavira, you listened to two speakers, Professor Rohan Samarjiva and Mr. Maskorala, very bullish, saying that EDCA is the way forward for a country like Sri Lanka. Free trade agreements are important in a globalized world. Where do you stand?
Let me say I may be the only person who is neither opposing nor supportive of ECTA compared to other three members, but they can talk in isolation. Professor Rohan Samarjiva said that even the cited countries, Vietnam and everything, say in 2008 they were signing many agreements. What we were doing in until 2010? We were fighting for the last bullet to end the 30-year war. Now, when our economy was in that kind of a condition, yes, thanks to our heroes, we rescued the country in 2010. Now the question is, from 2010, we should have directed the country in terms of what Professor Rohan Samarjiva said in terms of Vietnam. Vietnam ended the war in 1976, but they never liberalized or they never started signing agreements from 1978 onwards. They were closed until 2004. What they did during that period of 28 years? They make all the necessary legal enactments, regulations, and they were ready to liberalize. Now what we are saying as part of UPM, as part of OPA everywhere, we are neither opposing nor supportive of any trade agreement. What we are saying is, we have to put our house in order if we want to move forward.
What do you mean by putting the house in order?
Let me say, take very few examples. Look at Sri Lankan immigration laws and compared with all the other immigration laws in the region. We are far behind. Take in the professional registration mechanisms in terms of other countries. We don't have the concept called national registration. We don't have that kind of national registration mechanism in place. So what we were asking is just to make sure that our legal system is arranged or at least partly done to face necessary legal trade liberalization. We are not opposing, but only thing is, when we said this in 2003, parallel with CEPA negotiations, most of the government officials said, you are playing a game of delaying tactics. Now even 2016 we are saying the same thing. Now have we played the delaying tactic game, or whether the government officers has
But the government changed in 2004.
Yeah, but the departments are the same. Government can change, departments are the same, the officers are the same. And the question is,
the policy comes from the government which is in power. So your point about the department being there, the officers being there is not really valid, is it?
No, it's like this. Compared to the previous government, I respect the present government in terms of negotiations. That's I openly say, I openly accept, because thanks to the Honorable Malik Samaravikrama, things are on the negotiation table. We have participated. Now we don't participate due to so many issues, and things are we are at least in a communication channel, and we get certain amount of documents. But that does not mean our legal system is in order. Let me say, we presented the government a 44-page document in April 22nd this year, and the government said, okay, super, fine. And then we said, okay, government has to prioritize what are the areas to be liberalized, thereby to do the necessary legal enactments. But to date, they haven't said anything, and nothing has happened.
Now, before moving on to Mr. Veerasinghe, I have a question for you. You said that Vietnam enacted the trade agreements after 24 years. You don't expect Sri Lanka to wait for 24 years?
No, I don't expect the government of Sri Lanka to wait to 24 years or even 4 years. What we said in April 22nd report said, if the government is willing, we are willing to submit all our legal sectors within 6 months. So if the government is willing to liberalize education sector, let us sit down and negotiate and finalize all the legal enactments within 6 months. We are not asking to, but the government has to do it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nalaka Jayavira, representing the United Professionals Movement. And now move my attention to Mr. KJ Veerasinghe, advisor to the Agency for International Trade. Many say that the ETCA agreement has a lot of negative thoughts, a negative vibe is being emanated by ETCA itself. Mr. Veerasinghe, why is this a document which is being discussed under closed doors? Why not make it a white paper, get the public opinion, get the stakeholders involved, get the media involved, and then have it in the open? Why secret discussions?
Anyway, let me thank you for firstly inviting for me to take part in this.
Nice to have you on board, Mr. Veerasinghe.
Discussion. But before I get into that, I think I would like to make a few comments on the previous speakers. Now, of course, there's no debate on the need for trade agreements, free trade agreements with number of countries, because for the last 10 years or more, there had been, I would call it, there was a trade policy vacuum in the country. Other than the two agreements that we have with India and Pakistan and the SAFTA agreement, we don't have any agreements and we don't have a trade policy. So therefore, I think the government has announced on the need to have trade agreements as an extension of the domestic development policy, and it will be an integral part of the development objectives of the country. So the trade agreements to find markets, to get investments, so that is to get out of this debt-ridden economy and to get it a market-oriented, market-driven economy, exports, markets seeking economy. So that's a rationale behind. And also, while all other countries were entering into free trade agreements, we we were just waiting. Now, for example, LDCs, they have duty-free access to Europe and all other markets. India has entered an agreement with Japan, ASEAN, Singapore, all the agreements they have signed. So we are the only country in this region without entering into any agreement. So we don't have a level playing field. If we are not to be more competitive, at least to get the level playing field, we need to enter into this agreement. So that's the rationale the government is going ahead. So we have commenced negotiation with India, with Singapore, with China. So these must be taken all together, and of course with the restoration of GSP very likely in the first quarter of next year, So we will have assured market in the European Union. Then this agreement will also come into place, so that will open up markets. So that's on the agreement side. But on transparency, the question that you raised, I think this the Honorable Malik Samari has been extremely transparent, and I think we in fact circulated a document which normally is not done, the basic document on number of chapters, on goods chapter, services chapter, investment chapter, economic cooperation. All those chapters were circulated among all trade chambers. For example, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce sent their comments on most of the chapters. So if there's impression that some of these documents are not shared, I think it is not correct.
I agree with the fact that the draft document has been circulated amongst the trade chambers. However, the trade chambers have been told explicitly by your ministry, the ministry that you represent, not to share the document with the media. Why is that?
But basic document, I don't think there was a restriction in basic document, but of course negotiating position sharing with the these are public or trade chambers is not the practice nowhere in the world. Now say we have of course had a series of consultations outside, on the text. We had some consultation, then we also got the views of the trade chambers. In fact, 2 weeks ago all trade chambers were invited. In fact, we had a series of discussions on the United Professional Movement. Of course, Mr. Jaivira was mentioning about this 44-page document that was circulated. Yes, he did circulate. That is necessary to make all legislative reforms, regulatory mechanisms to be in place. That of course we agree that there is a need to put the regulatory mechanism in place and to do a lot of work. That is being done. There is a special committee is attending to that, and they are looking at all the legislation. It's not an easy task to amend and repeal or introduce new legislation on about 40 odd. So we need to prioritize them, and which is being currently done.
Mr. Veerasinghe, given the history of Indian involvement with Sri Lankan politics, trade and other affairs, are you not worried that India is trying to push this agreement as soon as possible?
I do not think so. I think if you recall, the Honorable Minister, Sitaram, when she was here, I think very categorically she said in the press conference and also during the discussions, India has no intention to rush it through, and take your own space, discuss, and at your own comfort level we will enter into agreement. There is no pressure on the Indian government side. Now say I had the opportunity to take part in 2 rounds of negotiations. One was in August, and last week we were in Delhi. So I think the first round of negotiations, what we did was we agree on the broader framework of the agreement. It's broad outline, which covers what are the main chapters of the agreement. So that was the main what we have agreed. Then in the second round of negotiations that we had, we went to much more details on the text and on different areas. But I must say, one issue that is being raised continuously is that there are large number of issues, what you call the implementation related issues, arising out of the ISFA or Industry Lanka Free Trade Agreement. So why, without addressing the outstanding issues or the implementation related issue, first fix them, then go for ITCA or the broad agreement? But what we have agreed, we recognize there are a series of issues that we need to resolve while this ITCA is being negotiated. So what we have agreed in principle is that both sides is that in parallel to ITCA negotiations, we will be addressing all implementation related issues arising of the free trade agreement, which was signed in 98 and came into force in 2000. For example, there are company related issues. So there are, I think, a dossier prepared by the Department of Commerce, which was handed over to the Indian side in December. In fact, we discussed it in August, and we'll continue. We discussed that also in second round of negotiation. Those specific issues faced by the individual companies are, delays in clearance, delays in customs procedures, all
you
that
have to
being
wrap
addressed.
up now, yes.
Sorry.
So thank you very much, Mr. Veer Singh, for joining us this evening as well, representing the government. Let me introduce you, the journalists this evening. Nadim Majid on to my right, Chadrang Haparachi on to my left, and onto my far left is Zulfiq Farzan. So I open the floor for questions. Let's start off with Zulfiq.
Thanks, Shamir. Mr. Masakuralan, you're involved in shipping. Now, in this industry, we've now heard that China is trying to rebuild its ancient Silk Route once again. With Sri Lanka entering into agreements with India, how far are we going to benefit from the agreement with India and also with China with the Silk Route coming in?
These are two different issues. China is trying to secure its supply chains by land and by ocean. So Sri Lanka is naturally a good transshipment port for Indian subcontinent. So obviously they have positioned themselves as a major supply chain securing node in their One Belt, One Road initiative. Now China is not restricting the trade to Sri Lanka or the Indian subcontinent. They are looking at the east coast of Africa. They are developing massive amount of ports in Africa. So China will need a lot of resources coming in for its market, and as well as exports out of its market to the emerging Africa and our part of the world. So it's a different issue. So I don't see a problem of the One Belt, One Road initiative, that China is pursuing it with even countries like Pakistan and the land road. The Indian ITCA is something completely out of it. That is a bilateral arrangement where we are looking at increasing trade with India as well as services, because we want to be a hub for manufacturing, hub for services, of course weighted more towards services. So if that is the case, we need to have a very good understanding and a proper set of rules to deal with India.
You said about understanding. I just want to raise this point because now Sri Lanka and India, we share a maritime boundary, and occasionally we find illegal fishing taking place. But with these agreements, why is there dead silence on this issue?
You are talking about the fisheries issue, is it?
Yeah.
Well, that's a completely a different.
But wouldn't it affect both economies?
I don't think so. That can be sorted out bilaterally in a political manner. It's more political issue than a trade issue.
Okay.
So I don't see that has any direct impact on the trade agreements that the government is having with India.
Mr. Veer Singh, coming to, I'll direct this question to you as well, Mr. Samarji. Now, when it comes to ETCA, before we delve into the details of it, do you think that there's a situation in the country where the politicians are using the ETCA deal as a political instrument to maybe manipulate the people to the way they want? Maybe by even going forward by misleading information, false information with regard to ETCA?
I would think that's happening because the lot of misunderstandings or misinformation, on the agreement. For example, if you take the service liberalization, I think there is a perception, or it's being spread, or the debate is that if the ITCA comes in and if the service liberalization take place, there will be flood of Indian labor coming into Sri Lanka, the barbers, masons, and all type of people come. I think one has to understand very clearly what is service liberalization is. When you talk about service liberalization, there is a business services, then the professional services, and various other services sectors. When you talk about services, it's not only professional services. It has maritime, it is air transport services, financial services, insurance, banking, all.
But Mr. Veer Singh, does that mean that at the end of the day, Sri Lankans are going to lose jobs? Does that mean that Indians are going to actually come, whether it be whatever service it may be?
Let me explain this. Now, the ITCA agreement is on broad agreement on, let us take the services sector. Now, when you are negotiating a services chapter, it has to be consistent with the WTO agreement on general agreement on trade in services. That agreement very clearly says the immigration policy, citizenship, residency, and all excluded very clearly. Yes. It has nothing to do with this ITCA. It is not of opening labor markets. It is not of people coming for employment or labor market. It is temporary movement of people to provide service. So if you look at the services, this controversy is about what you call in jargon, you call it movement of natural persons, so mode 4. So movement of natural persons broadly is taken and said the mode of under mode 4 people will just come. So during the negotiations we have categorically told the Indian side, and it is our position that mode 4 will be excluded, but I will explain it because little more detail, because mode 4 exclusion does not mean that everything will be. Mode 4 has 4 subsectors. Under mode 4 there are what you call, first is corporate transferees, that is a corporate employee of a particular entity is coming to to the other country to provide service. Say for example there is a bank or a hotel, and that particular person is transferred to Sri Lanka, he serves that 2 or 3 years and he goes back. It's a corporate transferee. Then the second person is a contractual supplier, that a person or an entity or a foreign company will get a contract for services, supplying of a particular service, say for airport or laying some pipes or some contract he gets. To under contractual suppliers, he comes to service that contract and finish that period and he goes back. And the third category is the business visits. A business visitor come to a country to provide the service not for sale, direct sales, to conduct a workshop or seminar or to do marketing or something, then he attends and goes. Then the fourth category is this controversy, independent professionals move into the other country to provide service. Those are the architects, doctors or accountants or lawyers, independent professionals moving. So under the current law, current BI regime, all that, the corporate transferees, contractual suppliers, business visitors, under the normal immigration laws of the country, under normal procedure they come.
That is not a problem.
That's not a problem. It is happening.
Yes.
But what we are talking is about the independent professionals moving to the country. That we have categorically said no.
Right.
So India, in our negotiations also, our position is clearly, we are open to discuss. Even first 3 we have said, not just blindly open. We are open to discuss all those 3 under a particular category if you are going to open up.
So let me sum it up. Are you saying that you are in discussion with abolishing this whole fact where the free movement of persons will take place? We will not allow that. That will not take place. Because we have to understand is immigration policy is quite independent. Right.
Immigration policy has nothing to do with this any of the agreement. Now say you take the United States or the Australia or New Zealand, they have extensively liberalized services, but their immigration policy is independent. It has nothing to do with service liberalization.
Mr. Veer Singh, on the matter of immigration policy, I want to bring in Mr. Javeer also on this discussion, because he raised what I felt was a fair point, that we need to be ready to open up. We need to be ready to.
I agree with that, because.
So, Mr. Javeer, can I ask you, what is the legislation we need to push through to be ready to liberalize in your way?
Number one, what even the government has agreed, we don't have a human capital commission. Now say, Mr. Veer Singh took the example of Australia and every country. Now have you ever found that we can go to Australia just because we like it? Australia says in advance, we need this profession at this amount of people, and that's how they advertise.
The skilled migration.
Skill migration. Now the skill migration goes on a calculation. Now what is the entity Sri Lankan government is having to identify how many professionals, or let me say how many architects are needed to this country? There's no single entity, and that has to be in place, number one, because that we have personally proposed even to the new constitutional council the reforms, saying we need a human capital commission as well as human capital authority. Without those things, the government of Sri Lanka cannot decide what's the sector that you want. And if I add to what Mr. Veer Singh said, I don't agree with his explanation in terms of ECTA, in terms of GATS commitment and the Mode 4. If you read the draft issued by the ministry dated 8th June 2016, first it says Mode 4 is closed. The second line says each country reserves the right to have their own legal systems in terms of controlling the mode flow. Now, if it is closed, why do you need the right to have necessary legal system? Then you go to the definitions. It defines a business entity means inclusive of mode flow. Then it goes to the legal definition, inclusive of mode flow. And further it says the market accessibility all includes all 4 modes. So now the question is, because in a one line says it is closed, does it mean it is closed? For me it is not, because all the the legal, I mean the clauses never satisfy that particular section.
Professor Samarjiva, will Indians work freely in Sri Lanka following the signing of EDCA?
No.
They won't.
That has not happened anywhere in the world. This is a crazy story. It has never happened anywhere in the world. The only place where it has happened, anything similar to people working freely in another country, applying for jobs that are advertised in newspapers or online or whatever, is the European Union. They have a European Parliament, they have a European Commission, they have a single market. That is not a trade agreement. That is something extraordinarily different. We are not talking about creating the union of India and Sri Lanka or anything like that. This is a trade agreement. There are trade agreements between Canada, Mexico and the United States. That's the earliest of the service agreements from the 1990s. That doesn't allow people to just move across the border wherever they want.
There is no need for Sri Lankans to worry. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, indeed, there is no reason. I mean, I think we should worry about certain things. There will be work that we will be deprived of because we can't assemble the teams. I think anybody who's in industry knows that we are experiencing labor shortages.
Right.
When you're trying to put together a team of 25 people to take on a particular big job, a particular consulting assignment or a software assignment, you know that you can't find certain skilled people. Right? Now, if you can't do that, you don't get the job, you don't create the jobs, the 23 people who would have otherwise been employed in that project would now be unemployed. Now, that is what is going to happen, because I believe that we should have more flexibility with regard to getting professionals in for particular assignments subject to all these constraints. I think the government is going too far in saying that there will be no movement of independent professionals, but that is my opinion. I am outside government.
Professor Samarjiva,
government should not be held to account of what I say. I think the government is wrong.
Professor Samarjiva, you had a ICT policy think tank. Now, a lot of the people who have been opposing this trade agreement are ICT professionals. We had recently, when we were discussing EDCA on the program, Sri Lankan Young ICT Entrepreneurs Association, a representative was talking about how this is going to collapse the ICT industry in Sri Lanka. How do you view this?
Have you heard the big ICT companies, the ones that have the thousands of jobs, going out and protesting about this agreement?
So
have you heard Virtusa and all these companies?
What about the smaller startups though?
The issue is even with smaller startups. I'll tell you what the real situation in this country is. We have labor shortages in particular skill areas. I know, I have a data analytics team, I have trouble getting people. There's a shortage of people all over the place, right? Now what we have to do today, if you're a BOI company, you go to the BOI, you get permission, you go to the immigration department, you get a 1-year authorization to bring somebody in. It's all personal relations, etc.
I'll come back to my question. I'll put it in very simple terms. If the Sri Lankan government signs EDCA, does that mean that small ICT startups in Sri Lanka will go out of business?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. As I said,
and why?
I think we are being too restrictive. We are not allowing our industry to grow. We are not giving them the flexibility. This is not about exporting more and importing less. This is about getting integrated into global and regional value chains. In order to do that, you need flexibility, you need certainty. That's what legal agreements give you. I don't have to go for my university buddies and various other things and say, Machang, do me a favor to get somebody in so that I can get the 25 people organized for a particular assignment. I have, the laws are written down, what is permitted, what is not permitted, how long it is allowed, can I bring that person's wife, if the wife comes, can she get employment, all that is in the agreement.
And finally, Professor Samarajiva, I wanted to ask you this before I move on to Mr. Masakorala. Do you agree with what Jaivir said on the legislation that we need to put through to be ready to liberalize? Do you think Sri Lanka is ready to liberalize?
I think Mr. Veerasinghe was absolutely correct. We need parallel tracking.
Right.
I think we have delayed long enough. I mean, we were the first country to liberalize in our region, and we kept that momentum from 1978. Today, we would not be in the situation we are in, where we are in a debt trap. We need to do things in parallel. We don't have the luxury of time. There are windows that are open, the windows are closing, right? We need to do things in parallel, and that is how these things are done. Malaysia, for example, has got a whole list of laws that it will have to revise, amend, maybe repeal, if they are going to be part of TPP. Did they say, until we get all this done, we won't sign TPP? No. They do TPP, they do this in parallel.
Mr. Masakorala, I want to ask you this question as well. Now, you're representing the Shippers Academy here. How will EDCA benefit transport and logistics?
Well, Sri Lanka first of all doesn't have the critical mass to be a logistics hub yet. So we need global players to position themselves in this country. We need the FedEx of the world, we need the DHLs of the world, we need the TNTs of the world, all logistics companies to have their headquarters in this country. And if they are positioning a headquarter in this country, they need movement of people, professionals coming in to do the back office, shared services.
So you're in support of Mode 4?
Yeah, of course, yes.
Mr. Jaivir, now we were talking about the policies that now if we are to get an identity card in the country, we know what criteria to follow. If you are to enter a university or state university, we know what criteria to follow. When we go into a trade agreement with another country, do we know the criteria that we should follow? Do we have a policy in the country to go into trade?
I think Mr. Veerasinghe has said that now they are trying to prepare trade policy, national trade policy. I would ask the same question, why they haven't done for the last 20 odd years?
Mr. Veerasinghe, why haven't we done for the last 2 years?
Do we need UPM and the people to shout at the government and the departments and officials, okay, we haven't done, you have to do it? This is the country where we are living now.
But Mr. Jaivir, in your own words,
you need to let Mr. Jaivir answer. Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Jaivir,
now you are answering your question. I prepared a 450-page document to analyze the Indian legal system in terms of architecture and handed over to the government. In the Indian Act, it specifically states no foreigners can register, right?
In India as architects?
As architects. And in the regulation it says no foreigners can become partners or directors of Indian architectural practices. Now if the law is like that, if our officials are proposing to liberalize profession of architecture with India and to come up on the stage and say, why Sri Lankan architects come and go and practice in India, yes, I can go, maybe end up in a cell. But take the other side of the story. Sri Lankan, do we have a law as at now? I am very sorry to say, there are foreigners, thanks to the BOI ex parte liberalization, who are not qualified at all as architects working in this country. Now, if such a unprotected system is there, can we expect more than what is there now?
Well, you posed a question, Mr. Jaivir, you posed a question to Mr. Veerasinghe. Mr. Veerasinghe,
well, first question that you ask is why there was no trade policy. But I don't say that there was no trade policy, but in the trade policy you have multilateral trade agreements, then you have regional, then you have bilateral. We all had this over the years. The fact that we are working with the WTO, we are the WTO Doha round we are participating, we have taken part in the Uruguay round in 96, we became a WTO member. So without a policy we would have not joined the WTO.
You are trying to say that there is a trade policy in
There was a trade policy, but there is a lacuna. It's also not a comprehensive, very methodical trade policy.
Isn't that why, Mr. Veerasinghe, we last 2-3 weeks ago we had the president of the GMO seated the very same place you seated. He said that, if I'm not mistaken, 9 doctors who are not qualified Indian doctors currently in Sri Lanka. Isn't that the reason why they are here?
That is not the trade policy. That's I agree with Nalaka, because there are lacuna in the in the regulatory mechanisms. Now, if we need to, whether there are ITCA is there or not, there are things that the country needs to do. One is the immigration policy, there are loopholes. Now say what happens is, if somebody wants to get a visa, he goes to one department, and if he cannot get, he goes to another department, and till he scouts around, till he gets a recommendation to go to the... So there is need to have a very strong monitoring mechanism, there need to be amendments, all that needs to be done by the immigration, which has been done. In fact, we had a consultation with the control of immigration. I think they are aware of these issues, and they have a comprehensive report being prepared to do all this review of the immigration policy. So likewise, there are issues that we
Mr. Very simple, very simple. Do we have a national trade policy?
Now, on the trade policy, the current government appointed a very high, very, very knowledgeable expert committee.
Yeah, headed by Dr. Ravi Ratnayaka. You had Dr. Sarath Rajapatirana, Subhashini Abhisingha, senior analyst and head of economics.
Yeah, that particular, they prepared a document. Yeah. That document last week released to all trade chambers for their comments.
So where is the media? Where is the media in this equation, Mr. Veerasinghe?
Well, that's something I think should have been sent to media. I think this was circulated among all trade chambers, all associations, and calling for their comments.
So, Mr. Veerasinghe,
so that is in place, but I must add, that is not the final document, it's a discussion document, and that document, through a consultation for the trade chambers and all that, they are taking into their inputs into account. This will become a final document. So it's been done currently.
Mr. Veerasinghe, are you sure that the ministry again did not advise the trade chambers not to give out this document?
No, that is a public document. In fact, the decision was taken, it should be put into the website of the Ministry of Trade, Ministry of International Trade.
Is it there on the website?
I think so, it should be. If not, I don't know whether then when you put, I think it should be done.
Mr. Veerasinghe, now according to what you're saying, as Mr. Jayavira said earlier, we need to get the house in order before we go into trade agreements.
Not
is that
necessarily.
correct?
We need to do in parallel, which has been done now. But the question is, if you are certain sectors, we don't have to have regulatory framework. I think this is necessary for professional service categories. If you are going to liberalize, at the moment we are not looking at professional service categories, particularly the independent movement and natural persons. We are not looking at the moment, so that can take place. In fact, what we told the Indian side in our discussion is that unless regulatory mechanism, all those are in place, some of these things we are not ready for opening up for.
Mr. Jayavira, why are you against it being done parallelly?
Well, it's like this. We are not against doing it parallelly. The question is, when now I'll go back to the draft again.
So you agree with what Mr.
No, give me a chance. Yeah, I agree on subject
that
certain
it should
conditions.
be done. You are not against it being done
conditions. Subject certain conditions. The present draft, whatever they have presented to us, the ECTA draft, it says we abide by the existing GATT commitments. Existing GATT commitment. Now the existing GATT commitment, what Sri Lanka has done, I would say horizontal commitments 95% open. India 95% closed. And our specific commitments is different. India is different. Now the thing is, you cannot read these documents in isolation. These ECTA or whatever free trade agreements should be read in conjunction with other commitments. Now the question is, when we have in even GATT, it says if the country does not have any licensing mechanism in place, if we want to have the new licensing mechanism after signing or liberalizing.
So in a nutshell, because we are short of time, in a nutshell what you're saying is that you're not against it being done parallelly, but it is impossible to do it parallelly.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
I think I must make a correction to
what
I had to make a correction to what he said. Now he said that in the WTO GATT commitments, Sri Lanka had made 95% horizontal commitments so open. I think which is incorrect. Now in the WTO horizontal commitments apply only to the sectors that we have committed to open. Now say I have the Sri Lanka schedule here with me. Now say it's under the sector, subsector, horizontal commitments. The first column said all sectors included in this schedule. All sectors in the schedule are what? Hotel and tourism sector, telecom sector, financial services. That's it. So those horizontal commitments apply only to those sectors. So just to say that because of the horizontal commitments are there, we have opened 95% is totally incorrect. It's applied only to those sectors that are open.
Can I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. The thing is, his argument, then we don't need horizontal commitments in GATS. Then only the specific schedule of commitments is needed. Why the GATS? Why the WTO asking for horizontal commitments? You better read the Sri Lankan horizontal commitments with Indian horizontal commitments. Then you will see the difference. Because then you will understand.
But what Mr. Javier, is it realistic? Can you realistically compare?
Can, because he has to agree. In GATS commitment, there's a
Mr.
process
Virasinghe, you cannot
called
speak on behalf of Mr. Virasinghe, so yes.
Yeah, okay. There's in GATS commitment, there's a process called positive list, not negative list. What we have done in GATS is negative list.
Totally incorrect.
Totally
Incorrect. Because GATS agreement is basically positive list approach, which means only now say I said in the WTO schedule classification there are 120 there are 120 W120 documents. There are 14 or 15 sectors. Then there are subsectors about 100 if you add up 140. Now which I said is professional services, transport services, banking services, insurance, all kinds of services. Now countries can pick out of that a sector, 2 or 3 sectors that you like to liberalize, which is you put them in a positively. Others you don't open.
Okay.
Others now you don't open. But in the goods sector, your approach is the other way, negative list approach. Which means now say for example, if you take the trade agreement with India, negative list means you liberalize or go to zero, eliminate tariff other than items in the negative list.
Okay,
negative list means those are not.
Why don't you ask Mr. Virasinghe to read what Sri Lankan horizontal commitments given to GATS?
No.
Can you read it?
Horizontal commitment I can read it to you. It will take about 10-15 minutes. But horizontal commitments in basically what it says is across the board what are the measures that will apply to all sectors. For example, BOI law. Then that's at that time 1995-96 there's a BI law. So those BI law, so we have put it. I think at that time I was not not who prepared it. That was 96, and those were listed as horizontal commitments. But of course after 20 years one could argue there need to be corrections to be made. Some maybe some the way it is written. But the fact remains. Those horizontal commitments or the across the board cross-cutting those measures will apply only to the commitments that Sri Lanka has undertaken, mainly hotels and tourism, financial services, telecommunication. Those are the only sectors committed.
Mr. Virasinghe. Before we go for a short commercial break, Mr. Javier, you said that in your opening round that you were involved in the discussion process initially when it came to EDCA. Why did you pull out?
Well, it's not my decision. I work for UPM as a consultant or
Why did you
pull out? The reason is the ECTA draft. The ECTA draft presented to the committee for us had many unacceptable areas, including the one. I don't know.
Isn't that why there are negotiations?
No. The negotiations, when we ask who has drafted it, nobody takes the responsibility. Now, when
the Minister of International Trade?
When we get a draft, right, there should be a responsible person. There's no responsibility.
So if it's chaired by the Minister of International Trade,
yeah,
then
but
who is
that is technically now when we ask from the minister, even minister look at who asked to put these things. Nobody answers. This is what has happened really.
Sorry?
Grave concern. The minister is saying that he doesn't know.
No, I don't think the minister ever said that he doesn't know. I think the basic document was drafted by the Department of Commerce, which is responsible under the Director General of Commerce, which is responsible for basically giving all technical inputs for the negotiations. And Director General of Commerce himself is a member of the negotiating team.
I have to answer.
So then that is being sent, and that is a document that he is speaking about.
Now, even that document contains specific projects. 100% specific projects. A framework agreement having 100% specific project, electricity line from this point to that point, road that point to this point. How can you have an agreement of that nature, and how can even a draft be presented for negotiation? And then, give me chance, Mr. Singh. And then there was a reference to International Court of Justice. And then there's a reference to dispute to be resolved of pork strait. And in the same section, it says the decisions arrived at cannot be arbitrated or challenged in any legal courts. So now the dispute of pork strait to be resolved by a trade agreement.
No, Mr. Javira, you said something, I'm trying to figure out what it really meant. You said that a draft is out and it is up for discussion or negotiations.
Yeah.
So isn't that the normal format? There is a draft and then negotiations
it's like this.
are made
now the
on that premise.
draft, even this draft is
And that is
having,
why probably they spoke to you as well, your organization.
No, it's like this. A draft can be a draft. A government will have a draft within themselves. Then such a draft to be present for a discussion should be at a different level.
So you're trying to say that the government is misleading organizations like yours?
Well, that was the impression of many when you have such a project details included in the agreement.
Thank you very much.
understand why
Thank you very
you
much.
pulled
Now,
out
we
of
need to
the-
go for a short commercial break, but we'll get to the opportunity now to pose questions in the fourth round. We're going for a short commercial break. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is EDCA and beyond. Is trade the way out of the debt trap? Let's start off the third round with Mr. Rohan Maskorala, CEO of the Shippers Academy. Right now, Mr. Maskorala, many organizations, many professional bodies, including the GMOA, are concerned that India will expand the market for its goods and services at the expense of Sri Lanka. Is this going to happen? You said the fourth clause is out, so there is no transfer of natural persons from country to another. However, goods and services will come at the cost of Sri Lanka.
So this argument I don't agree, simply because I am a strong believer that we can be a Singapore or a Dubai. That is, I think, the vision of the government also with its megapolis project. I believe so. I have listened to the Prime Minister's statements on this, and they want to become that kind of a hub. So India cannot never be a hub for shipping or aviation or anything because of certain factors, that it's a large country. Now just because China came in as a huge developed nation, Hong Kong has never lost its position. It's still the world's third largest shipping hub. So you see the argument of the Chinese opening up its ports and opening up for shipping and all that. One time in the early 90s there was a huge scare that Hong Kong will lose out. Hong Kong never lost out, in fact Hong Kong gained. So I don't buy into the argument that ITCA or trade liberalization or bilateral agreements, which we have been far behind. As Mr. Veerasinghe said, we have only 2, and that also has not been successful very much because of the regional issues we have had, political, maybe the war, all these issues. We have never really benefited out of it in a big way, but there is a lot of potential. The way India is growing, the way India is doing its reforms, the recent GST reforms, the Indian government is going on a very positive agenda. If we don't plug into the Indian economy, we will probably be the losers.
Mr. Bhaskar, do you in any way believe that Sri Lanka is sandwiched between India and China?
I don't think so. Both I see as opportunities for Sri Lanka. That's why I think I talked about the maritime Silk Road and why the Chinese have invested in a massive terminal, and they are further keen to invest in Hambantota. So there is no sandwich around that. It's about Sri Lanka has to balance it. That's all. There are political issues that they may have to balance.
Why India? Why not sign a similar agreement with a European country?
Why not with India?
We are not in Europe.
Exactly, we are not in Europe. Our proximity is in India. Why not with India? Right? We are doing with Singapore. I am very happy.
When you take a look at the past, let's take a look at the war in Sri Lanka. Who instigated the war? What happened afterwards? The fishing problem that is plaguing the north of the country. All these things should be solved. However, India is trying to now give us a hand and say, okay, we want to help you. How genuine are they in their efforts?
Well, I don't want to live in the past. I want myself and my kids to live in the future. And future is South Asia. There is a next economic bloc that is developing in Asia. And that's a fact. India has been recognized by the global leaders that it's a new emerging economy. So whether Sri Lanka wants to plug into it or talk about the history, I mean, if you open up the history of geopolitics, why the war started, who supported what, that it will be another 2 hours. I don't want to go there, but I want to go into the future. Future is trade and services and transfer of people in the globalized economy. So if you are going to stop, today Singapore, look at Singapore, 2 million are expats out of its 5 million population. In Middle East, Dubai, it's about 80% expats. So if you want to stop expats, we will not be a hub here. That's the reality. We were talking about the barbers and the cleaners. We don't have them at the moment also. We have a shortage. So where are we going to get it? Are you going to do it? Then whom am I going to blame? The government?
Who is going to gain out of this agreement?
I think the vision the country has to gain. Country has to have more business coming in, more movement of goods and services happening, which will have a natural growth in the economy, because the demand and supply will set in, and we will have overall benefit. That's of course a trade agreement has to benefit both sides, definitely. So that's the whole issue here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rohan Maskoral, CEO of the Shippers Academy of Sri Lanka. We are now moving our attention to Mr. KJ Veerasinghe, advisor to the Agency for International Trade. Mr. Veerasinghe, why did this agreement come now? Why? 8th of January 2015 elections, we saw a new government coming into play under the patronage of President Maithripala Sirisena. Then we saw on the 17th of August 2015 there was a general election, there was a coalition government that was appointed by the people of Sri Lanka. It's close to 1 year and 2 months or so since the government came into power. Why are we discussing about such an agreement now, and why is your government pushing it forward? Why?
Let me explain. I think when you're talking about the trade policy, I think you should not take one country in isolation. Now say it's a overall policy of the government, need to have market access, need to enter into free trade agreements. Now first is that earlier, as I mentioned, we lost GSP plus in 2010, we lost the markets, so we need to restore it back to get the GSP. So we submit the application on GSP in July. I think we are hopeful. I think we will be getting the GSP plus at least in the first quarter of, so that is restored. So but of course our view is that the GSP plus will be available for a limited period of time, because we will become an upper middle income country. Mm-hmm. Then in the long term we need to also negotiate a free trade agreement with European Union, because European Union and EU and the US are the main two markets. Still Sri Lanka is about 70% or over goes to the EU and the United States. So we need to sustain and grow in those markets, so we need to have agreements, we need to work around. Then we have India, we have China, we have Singapore, and we are talking about possibility of Japan, and broadly that part of that policy is one agreement is India, which is a huge market. So with the market access also you need to understand the trade investment nexus, the linkage. So trade takes place where the trade is there, the investment comes. When the investment is there, trade takes place. So these are linked. So you can't take one out of the other. So we are looking at a larger market, but of course I must explain at this stage, there is a huge trade balance that is being talked about. We import 4.3 billion from India, we export only 644 million US dollars. But if you go into deep and see, under the ISFP or the Indo-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, Sri Lanka make use of about 70% to 80% of our exports goes under the Indo-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement. But Indian imports out of 4.3 billion, it is less than 15% is under the agreement. Everything is on the outside. Because if you take motor vehicles, it is in the negative list, not subject to tariff reduction. So therefore, it is a large value. So it is outside the agreement. So so therefore there is a misconception that everything is coming into from India is under the ISTF. It is not so. So but we are looking at market access for example, under the proposed ITCA, we have proposed, Honorable Minister and the government, there should be early harvest program, which means there should be certain elements should we agree and must be implemented the day the agreement come into force. For example, there is a quota on apparel, that 8 million pieces, that should be removed. There is a quota on paper, 2,500 metric tons. We have put a proposal, all these quota restrictions should be removed. So if it is removed, then we get market access and to increase exports.
Mr. Veerasinghe, you said that the Indo-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement came into play in the year 2000, was signed in the year 1998, and then you said that there are many issues plaguing with this accord itself. Why not solve this, strengthen this accord and move forward? Why a new pact?
No.
Why?
Because that agreement is only limited to goods.
It can be for services as well. An amendment could be brought forward. It's transparent. It's black and white. People know what this agreement is all about.
That agreement covers only goods, ISTFEA. So we need to negotiate other chapters on the services, investment, economic cooperation, technology cooperation, and all these elements to be a broader agreement. So that's what we are doing now.
So does that mean that when ETCA comes into play, the Indo-Lanka Free Trade Agreement will be null and void?
No, it's not, because you can't. It cannot.
Well, you have a.
It cannot be null and void. It will become integral part of the current agreement because we have already undertaken.
So it's incorporated in the current agreement.
It has to be.
Is it?
Yeah. It has to be incorporated into the current ITCA because we have already undertaken commitments. For example, in the Indo-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, you take the tariff liberalization. Over a period of 3 years, India liberalized its tariff, all of the tariff lines except the items that are in a negative list. Sri Lanka liberalized, went to eliminate the tariff over a period of 8 years. On 2008 we liberalized. So now items that we have gone to zero, we need to, both sides have to continue to honor those commitments. If it's a new, all tariff liberalization that we have undertaken, are we going to restart the whole thing again? No. So that tariff liberalization program, those commitments we will honor because the goods chapter of the ISTFEA will be renegotiated with some improvements, will become a part of the ITCA. But what we want is, what we have agreed, it's in the agreed minutes, all implementation related issues arising after the ISFTA will be addressed in parallel to the ITCA negotiations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Veerasinghe, for your thoughts in the third round, advisor to the Agency for International Trade. We now move our attention to Mr. Naraka Jayavira, United Professionals Movement. Ms. Jayavira, looking at the bolts and nuts and getting somewhat a feeling of what ETCA is all about right now, it doesn't seem that bad, is it? Your time starts now.
It's like this. You cannot say it is not bad. It is bad if it's signed under the present laws of the country, because when the government does not have necessary legal mechanism in place, if you sign it, then the problem will start. Now the question is, I'll come back to the legal stuff that we have argued. Immigration laws in India specifically states a foreigner can be in India for a maximum period of 1 year. If you take Sri Lanka, there are Indians as well as non-Indian foreigners who are working in this country more than 5-10 years. Where do we stand? Because there are so many loopholes in our legal system. So we have to rectify those things, at least partially. Now take example, a professional registration. Anyone
who does not have valid visa can be deported, right, Mr. Jayavira?
No, but the thing is, the deporting and everything that should be in the legal format. When there are loopholes, people are playing with it. Now,
how can there be loopholes? I'm trying to figure out. Now you overstay a visa, or you're doing something that your visa does not require for you to do. The immigration and immigration officials can arrest you, produce you, and then deport you.
It is not overstayed. The theory is, in India, you can work, if you go and read the GATS agreement, maximum for a period of 1 year. How can you say wrong?
Mark Tully, everybody knows about BBC correspondent Mark Tully. He lived there. He didn't take Indian nationality.
Professor,
He
I'll come to you in a
for
minute.
all that years.
We have to give,
this is outright false.
Yes.
Yeah, he can say outright false, but if you can read the GATS commitment, it specifically says maximum period of 1 year.
Can you show me the article?
Mr.
Can you
Javira,
show me where it is?
It's
Mr.
Indian GATS commitment.
Mr. Veerasinghe,
So
what is that? That is not
no,
give me
that
that.
has nothing to do with the Indian
So this is what?
That
This is what? This is what?
Why
Now
should
say
we
Sri
look at the Indian
Lanka.
schedule? We are talking.
Mr. Veerasinghe, we need to give an opportunity for Mr. Javira to
No, but
explain, but we
it's
will get back to you in a minute.
correct.
I will give you an opportunity to
Okay,
speak.
right, all right.
But yes, Mr. Javira.
Now say, when those laws are tough in the other end, when we have certain amount of loose format, where do we stand? Tell me, I'll tell you. Any of you all can go and float an architectural company, the register of companies. There's no procedure for you, for your application to be referred to SLI or anything. Any of you all can do it. This is the law of this country. Now, when you have that kind of a loose format, what we are asking is, at least we will strengthen certain sectors, specifically the major ones. Number one, because those areas has to be make sure it will be rectified. So, what we are saying is, as at now, there's a huge legal gap between what we are talking and what is exactly
Mr. Javira,
legal
it seems to me that you're only speaking of one side. Let's talk about the accounting field for an example. If you're not a chartered accountant, you can't audit in Sri Lanka. If you're not a certified surveyor, you cannot do the surveys in Sri Lanka. So there are laws in place in Sri Lanka.
It's good.
Maybe it is not being implemented.
It's good you brought the chartered accountancy. In this country, only chartered auditing part is more protected. Okay?
The others are not.
Chartered accountants, then their only job is not auditing. There are so many financial analysis, financial reports, there are so many things that the chartered accountants do. And those sectors, as at now, there are no regulations. Tell you point blankly, even doctors are much protected than us. They are the best among the worst. The only
You're referring to us as who?
Huh?
Us as who? Who's us?
Means our construction industry professionals like architects, engineers, quantity surveyors and that kind of people.
Yeah.
Now say their major issue is there's no such registration, national registration mechanism for consultants. Where India have such a mechanism. Now we don't have anything. Chartered accountants have certain part of it in terms of auditing. Take lawyers. The lawyers, because there are so many unwritten conditions, like say you have to pass the mother tongue at O level before you have the Supreme Court registration, there's a protection part of it. We don't have it.
So who's at fault?
Protection.
Sorry?
Who's at fault?
It's, I would say, partly...
Isn't it the individuals in the industry itself who are at fault?
I would say partly the professional institutes are responsible. Other parties, when the government is trying to negotiate, it's their duty to understand the laws of the other countries and propose necessary amendments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Javira. Maybe the government is not aware. Let's now move our attention to Professor Rohan Samarjeeva, Chair of Learn Asia. Professor, taking a look at what this whole agreement is all about, what many people cannot figure out is the fact that why is it being discussed under closed doors? Why isn't at least the media have a draft of this particular document in question? Isn't it better to have a draft? Isn't it better to have a white paper on this?
I think your question has been already asked and answered. Nobody negotiates trade agreements anywhere in the world wide open with every clause. A trade agreement is give and take. It's only at the end that you disclose these things. I think it has been asked and answered. I think more important is, as media, if you want to play a role in this, you have to go beyond asking about benefits. Benefits, I think the cat came out of the bag in the last round. It is protection for my profession. Protection. It is not wrong to talk about protectionism. because this is about suppliers who are not mindful of competition and higher quality for the consumer, who are only interested in upping their benefits, getting their car permits, getting their children into popular schools and getting various privileges, who are trying to protect their positions, wanting the government to protect them from any competition. We have problems. Because why is it that our people go to India to get heart operations? Why is it that only the rich will go to Singapore for operations? Because they are not satisfied with the quality of medical services provided here because of all the protection that these people have been given. But the people who cannot go, the consumers who cannot go, suffer. Only the rich are allowed to do these things. So it's a protection for these privileged groups that they're looking for. They don't want competition. We have seen what happened when we opened up competition in telecommunication. The local telecommunication engineers got their ass kicked and they had to perform better, right? They had to do better than they used to, because that's what competition does. And we have to have more competition in our economy, not less. Our objective must be how do we serve the consumers? Should the consumers get cheaper cars? Should they get better medical services? These are the questions trade policy should answer, not whether these privileged groups get protection. And I think I have to disagree with Mr. Nalaka Jaivira on the factual errors of what he is talking about. The factual errors are that when there is everybody in this trade field, we know what positive list is. He denies that there is any kind of positive list approach. That's an outright wrong statement. You cannot conduct a conversation when somebody says black is white. He says that Indian law prohibits anybody, Indian immigration law is what he said, prohibits anybody from staying more than 1 year. That is wrong. We know that there are people who've been living and foreigners living and working in India for many years under the immigration law, not under trade agreements, right? Trade agreements are about corporate transferees, about business travel. So in those cases, he's conflating these things. He's talking about labor minus countries that need migration, permanent migration. He's conflating Australia's requirements to attract migrants to keep its economy going to completely different issues, such as we are trying to get temporary movement of people in order for us to be part of value chains.
Professor, I want to interrupt you for a second here. Getting back to why media should be aware of trade agreements of this sort. Do you remember what was promised to the people of Sri Lanka prior to the 8th of January elections? Good governance, transparency, and this was articulated by respective government, also the United National Party.
I think Rohan answered it. I think Mr. Veer Singh answered it. Yeah, but you don't, even when you're a company, you're in the middle of a negotiation, you don't talk about all the little, are we going to give 5% here and are we going to take a penalty clause of 20%? We don't talk about that. It's only at the end of it that you talk about it. The issue is this. These trade agreements have been put to the people and they have voted on it. You wanted to know why we are dealing with it now? We are dealing with it now is because the United National Party put it in its manifesto that trade agreements will be negotiated. They have a people's mandate to negotiate these trade agreements. This was clearly stated, right? You can't have it more than that. In black and white, these countries were mentioned, these trade agreements were mentioned under the section which says this is how we create 1 million jobs. That is a political mandate that the government has. Why is nobody talking about that? That is transparency. Once you have that mandate, you can do all these things. Now, Mr. Ravi Ratnayaka's document should be public. Maybe the government is just slow. It's been, what, 1 week?
1 week.
I would like to see it. I would like to see it. Those kinds of broad documents.
Ensure that it will be available.
Broad documents should be available, but negotiating documents? I'm sorry, that's where are these things? Even in the right to information law, there is an exception to the nitty-gritty of trade agreements. You can talk about this endlessly, but you'll never get any trade agreements done. Or if you apply this rule to the mineral sands company owned by the government negotiating with some entity, all their individual negotiations should be public? I think not. that is competitively sensitive information.
Thank you very much, Professor Rohan Samanjeeva, for your thoughts in
I had to answer
the
two questions.
fourth round. Would give you an opportunity for sure, Mr. Javira. We will start the Q&A, and during the Q&A you could respond to the views and sentiments expressed by the gentlemen onto your left, as well as the gentleman onto your right as well. Let's open the floor for questions. Let's start off with Zulfik.
Thanks, Shamik. Mr. Veerasinghe, I have a question for you. Now, these trade agreements, we agree that it should be beneficial for Sri Lankans. But now, for the rural masses, this seems to be something alien. Now, with the miscommunication and the lack of trust, there's a bit of controversy. From the government's point of view, what is the government doing to address this?
Well, one is, I think we need to actually, this is the English program, I agree, but I think we need to communicate more in Sinhala and vernacular of the people, and they should understand. And I think we started doing some write-ups in Sinhala language, and myself I did that, and we publish in Lanka Deepa and Tv1 and other newspapers for them to read. But I think there may be need for us to reach the rural areas. So I don't know whether it's an informal sector, not organized. Now say we would be able to go to the Ceylon Chamber or the export associations and make whole seminars and and share information and disseminate information. I think we need to do that. I don't know whether directly, I don't know whether they're benefiting, because essentially to seek market access and get market access into the countries, I think, is the business community that we are interacting with, address their problems. But finally, if the economy grows and if we can find markets for some of their products, then that will benefit the rural masses. Now say for example, I mentioned about the quota on paper. Now we want that be removed. Now say there are 2,500 metric tons quota imposed on paper, and that if that is removed, that will benefit the agriculture economy of the country. Now similarly, we want the quota on apparel removed. That is 8 million pieces they have imposed, that we want totally removal of that. So if it is opened up, we will be able to not only in Indian context. Now for China agreement, one of the specific items that we have identified is the removal of elimination of tariff on identified apparel products under the Chinese Sri Lanka agreement we have proposed. So if we have estimated we should be able to get, if the Chinese market, China imports about 6 billion worth of apparel into China, we should be able to export at least 500 million. If that happens, the more factories will be opened up. In now say already factories are moving into rural areas in the country because the employment or the lack of labor in zones. So strategically all the apparel companies are now moving to various rural areas where is the labor is available. So then that will benefit those industry, the people in those areas. That is the employment generation and economic growth and getting better.
Mr. Veerasinghe, you speak very highly about your ministry. Tell me the website of your ministry.
Well, I think website was to be established. I am not responsible. I think I should take the responsibility if it is not updated. In fact, this is a minister gave us.
Well, not only there is no update, there is no site to log into, unfortunately.
That I think is a very serious situation. I think we need to rectify it.
Is that the fate of the Ministry of Development Strategies and International Trade in Sri Lanka?
No, I think there is a Department of Commerce website, but of course that is not under the same ministry. But Department of Commerce website, if you go to that, will have all the trade agreements, everything will be there. But I think there is
people are in the dark. Why?
That I think need to be corrected. I think minister gave a specific order on the website, and in fact we were asked to load the all national policy document, trade policy document.
The website was www.modsit.lk. Where is the site?
I think that has to be rectified immediately, I would admit.
So there is a problem. Someone is hiding something?
No, I think it should not have happened. I think it should be there. I think that's a...
It is not there, Mr. Veerasinghe.
And I was told that it's there. In fact, we were asked, in fact, outline of the document that I
When was the last time you logged on to the website, Mr. Veerasinghe?
No, outline of the document was they have it was supposed to be there. I know.
But there is no website to log into, even to see an outline.
I will check on that. I don't know whether that of course I.
You can note down the website is www.modsite.lk, and it is not functioning. Okay, gentlemen.
Mr. Maskoral, a question to you now. You are a businessman as well. Now, in business, there is always a risk involved. But when it comes to this particular agreement, there seems to be a risk. But is it more than the benefit that we will get?
You told that I am a businessman. Yes, I fully agree about this competition. I like to compete. You see, when I started the Shippers Academy, it's a local institution, I am competing with the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers, Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. If I was a protectionist, I should run to government and say, look here, I am a Sri Lankan doing this market is mine, you better give me some benefits against these guys who are coming and setting up and doing trading here. I didn't go and do that. I am doing better than that today here in Sri Lanka because I innovate, because I have to compete with them, British products. So I am a strong believer in competition. If people are not wanting protectionism, you can talk about protectionism, but I fully agree with Professor Samarajiva. I am not going to cover anybody who wants protectionism and have a comfort zone to work with the local market, and they are happy with that. I actually want to go to India to start a Shippers Academy in India. I can't, because right now there are issues, restrictions. If this comes into play, maybe I can start. So I am looking at Bangladesh, right? So what is this about?
But there is pessimism in your voice right now. You are saying maybe I can do it in India.
No, what I am saying is all the resistance coming in, I don't know when this will start, simply, right? I don't know when this will simply start, because nobody is talking against Singapore-Sri Lanka dialogue. Nobody is talking too much against. When the Chinese people are working here, Chinese people are building ports, our architects were not taken in. And the airport was built, the Chinese, I don't know what all the Chinese were here, nobody was protesting.
For a second, Mr. Guranga.
So this why it is a matter of trust with India as far as I can see, some kind of a trust issue.
Professor Samarajiva, again I get back to my earlier question with regard to enlightening the media. The Ministry of Development Strategies and International Trade does not even have a website. What are your thoughts?
I'm sad. I'm disappointed. I mean, they really don't have an excuse, because the ministry has been in place for 1 year, since August to this year.
Are they trying to hide something?
No, most of the time with our government, it's not bad intentions, it's incompetence. It's
no
incompetence.
bad intentions, it's incompetence.
It's incompetence. I mean, which one do you prefer? You want to say bad intentions? I say incompetence. I run a government organization. I know the problems that we have in the government. Incompetence.
Mr. Javir, privileged groups that want to protect their own little dominions,
I think
that are holding the country back. To put it in context though, with regard to healthcare specifically, when you consider the grief that people who are unfortunate enough to have to use the public healthcare service go through whenever our doctors want to put their children into a school, or whenever they want to get something done from the government, it's members of the public would find it hard to disagree with what the gentleman on your left is saying.
Yeah, I have to answer whatever he has said. I think false statement. I never referred Indian immigration laws. I said please look at Indian GATS commitment, because ECTA refers GATS commitment by the two countries, nothing to do with the immigration laws. So his argument may be right outside the agreement.
But there are foreign nationals.
I have to correct what he said. Then he said that I am kind of a protectionist. No, I started the discussion saying we are for liberalization subject to certain conditions, because we have to have equal opportunities, not unequal opportunities. Then Professor Rohan Samarajiva says that I am for caste and my children. Well, I am from private sector, I am not a doctor, right? I am professionally chartered architect. I don't get permit caste, neither my child is entitled for any of the Colombo schools. That's the reality. So what I discuss here is facts. If you answer your question, I am not supposed to answer for and on behalf of GMO or any other profession. What I told, the question being asked in terms of accountants, I refer the same thing parallel to other professions, including lawyers. So, subject to that, I am not here to say whether the movement of doctors is right or wrong is not a question. My question is whether we have laws to go through the necessary systems.
But they are part of United Professionals movement.
They are even
They
the
are an
lawyers.
important part of your organization. You
It's
should
not.
speak. If you are representing them, you should then defend them.
Give me chance. I first said I have been in the UPM, but when the UPM walked out from the discussion, I am with the OPM.
No, you said
So-
you are representing the United Professionals movement.
It's-
Doctors are part of it. Protectionist
Yeah, can be.
organizations
Can
are part of it.
Can be.
So defend
can
them.
Be. Then the certain IT professionals are there.
So defend them.
No, I
defend
don't,
the protectionists.
No, I am not here to defend any person. I am here to.
You take
openly
what you like and they take no responsibility for what you don't like. That's a very nice way of arguing.
Isn't it the same thing what he does? No, he neither represent government but comes and says something else.
I represent myself.
So simple as that.
Ah.
Yes, I was part of
So
the
then
UPM.
please say that you do not represent the United Professionals movement.
Did I say
Please say that.
Did I say I represent
You
the
said
UPM?
right at the beginning.
No,
Of
I
course.
said I was with the UPM, and when the UPM walked out from the discussion, I was with the OPA. Now, then the OPA has so many professional organizations. That doesn't mean that the question is, we were arguing not on individual professionals. We were arguing, let us have
You
a
were
legal
talking
system.
about the various professions that were given protection. You said
No,
the lawyers
that
are
is-
very nicely protected and the quality of our legal system
I
is very
think
poor as a result.
No.
The doctors are protected and we, architects, are not protected enough.
Professor-
Please give us more protection.
No,
That's what you're talking
No,
about.
Professor, can you? You are going on the wrong track. What I told you was the Indian system protects Indian architects and they prohibit foreigners. What we said was we never prohibit foreigners, but at least allow the qualified people to walk in. So you are hitting the wrong track. We are not, even under unilateral liberalization, we are not protected.
Mr. Jayavira, with what you are saying, we can't leave aside ETCA, we can't go into any trade agreement with any country with the background you're saying that we have in the country. Is that right?
It's like this. Having unilateral liberalization is a different story. Having bilateral is a different story. That's why I referred the GATS and I said specifically you cannot read in isolation these agreements. You have to read it with so many other stuff. So what we are saying is can be done. Then, as Mr. Veera Singh has said, or everybody says, parallelly, then we have to have a real strategy to have necessary laws and everything in place.
Your stance is a bit unclear at this moment, Mr.
Why?
Jayavira. Are you saying that we can go ahead with trade agreements with India if the situation in the country is settled? Is that what you're saying?
If the countries, it's like this, that's why I said we are not against any trade agreements. We are not to say that we cannot sign with China, India. Forget about India. Even if we sign with China, Singapore and all the other countries, still we need the legal system, irrespective of India. So Indian aspect may have a political line of argument outside, but what we are saying is professionally, irrespective of the country to be signed with agreements, our system should be in place.
Professor Samarji, now we are talking about this, doing this parallelly, coming up with the regulations, the rules and the laws and going ahead with the ETCA. We are talking about it going parallelly, but when it comes to these two, when you keep it at a line, are we at the same stance? Can we go parallelly? Because from what it seems like, the regulation point of it seems to be far behind. ETCA seems to be a bit closer to the finish line. What is your view on this?
Well, look, I mean, the purpose of trade agreements, we must understand. The purpose of trade agreements is not to export more and import less. That is not the purpose of trade agreements. The trade agreements, there are two things that you're trying to do. One is, you're trying to maximize the benefits for the public benefits, the public welfare. When we drop tariffs, and we have better inputs into our economy performs better. That is a good thing by itself, right? It may mean that we are importing more, but that's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, right? The other thing is that today the world economy is organized into value chains, and we are not if we are to advance to upper income status, we have to be participating in value chains. We need the certainty. We need the legal environment within which companies will invest in value chain components in our country. In order to do that, ideally we need the WTO agreement. If we can't have that, which I think everybody agrees, now that's not on anybody's policy agenda of things that will happen. We need regional agreements. If we can't get regional, we need bilateral. This is one of the most important markets that we are here. We are right next to. We trade with who we have advantage. They are willing, for various geopolitical reasons, they are willing to agree to sign an agreement with us. The Chinese, by the way, are very keen that we sign an agreement with India. The Chinese are asking for when the agreement with India will be in place, because for their plans, it is beneficial. Sri Lanka becomes an attractive country to negotiate with and to invest in, to connect to the Silk route, if we are connected to a large market and not just 20 million people. So these are the benefits that we get from trade agreements, not whether some professionals will get protection from competition of better suppliers than the ones, the poor quality ones that we have in our country.
The international pressure that we are getting to go ahead with ETCA is positive, you are saying?
Well, there's no international pressure. Believe me, people were thinking that the UK will negotiate a trade agreement with us. A study that has been done in the UK says that they wouldn't even put time into negotiating with Canada, because Canada is not significant enough a market for the United Kingdom. Mr. Veerasinghe knows that when you are negotiating trade agreements, you have to allocate resources. You have a small number of qualified people and you allocate them for the most important things. Sri Lanka is not an important market for most of these countries that the people of Sri Lanka want to enter into agreements with. The UK wouldn't give us the time of the day.
So are we
have other things to handle.
Is that what you're saying?
No, because of the political environment that we are in, I think we should try to get into ASEAN through Singapore, and we should try to tap the Indian market. If we can get SAFTA going, if we can get BIMSTEC going, that will be all very good. It's much better to have multi-country or plurilateral agreements than bilaterals. But these are the people who are willing to talk to us.
Mr. Veerasinghe, do you know why Donald Trump and in fact even Bernie Sanders' stance on TPP has been so successful that even Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State to President Obama, who's a strong proponent of TPP, is now of a position where it's no TPP? Do you know why it's so successful?
No TPP, not exactly.
Not exactly no TPP,
no
but
TPP,
silent
on it. Yes, there you go. That's
so
the way of putting it.
part of the reason why that strategy that the certain factions within the US Republican Party have adopted, the reason that it's so successful is because of the simplicity and appeal of the way in which they communicate it. So I'm not going to badger you on the absence of the ministry's website, the mysterious disappearance of the ministry's website. But what I do want to ask you is to explain to me in layman's terms, for the benefit of our viewers. Imagine that I was a plumber. Give me a situation where ETCA benefits me.
Average. It will come through it will come through market access, exports being increased, investment coming into the country, integrating into the world economy. We are linking into the value chain. It's a development strategy, part of the development strategy of the government. So unless the development of the development policy of the government is there to raise 1 million jobs, increase exports, and the contribution of international trade to GDP to be substantially increased, all that to happen, you have to have market access. So trade policy is a part of it.
You're looking from a macro perspective. I'm saying for the benefit of the person who's watching. Let's say, okay, maybe plumber was a bad example. Let's say someone else, a professional of some sort, a doctor, or a IT professional.
Why not the plumbers? Plumbers will benefit. Plumbers will benefit.
So tell me, from a micro perspective, I want to hear this from the Agency for International Trade. I'm sure Professor Samarajiva will have an articulate answer for us, but I want to hear this from the Agency for International Trade. How would he benefit? Because when you're talking about market access and linking up to value chains, you're talking from a macro perspective. You're talking about, I want you to tell me how the individual tradesman is going to benefit from EDCA?
So of course, with the economic growth, their living standards will raise. So they will the wage. So it's definitely the whole population has to benefit.
Mr.
from
Veer
it.
Singh, what I mean is the other side has sort of got this message, this fear into this plumber that a bunch of Indian plumbers are going to come in and take his job. What are you going to do to assuage his fears?
Is the need to worry is if the labor market is open and if their jobs are threatened, it's not going to happen. We are not going to open the labor market. We are not going to allow anybody to come. Flood the market from the Indian, for them to come and work in all areas. It's not going to happen. So he should have the assurance that he can continue to do whatever he's doing.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your thoughts on 4 rounds that we've already had so far. We're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's the final round. This is Face the Nation. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. Let's start off the final round with Professor Rohan Samarjeva, Chair of Learn Asia. Professor Samarjeva, when will EDCA be signed? Now, you might tell me that I am not in the prediction business, so I cannot predict. When do you think this agreement will be signed
Generally
and put
speaking,
into
I think
effect?
government should move fast. I am a great believer in the 100 days theory. I think a lot of things should have been done in the first 100 days of the UNP government, which would have been over by about January of last year. Now, a trade agreement is tough to do within that time. What I have understood is that they have had 2 meetings, 2 negotiating rounds. That is not enough. So I would say that you'll have to have at least about 7 or 8, at least. 6, 7 rounds. So if you take the timetable, now when I was involved in working on the preliminary report, the study group report, we met pretty much every 2 weeks, and we moved it within, I think, 3 months. If that kind of urgency is shown, I would think that they might be able to do it in early 2017. But I don't see that kind of urgency in this government. They tend to take things very slow.
And is that good?
No, it's not. I think you need to, I mean, a government, you must remember there's a political cycle, right? So it's in the first 2 years that you got to do the important things. The last 2 years you're basically getting ready for the election. So there's 1 year where you're sort of in between. So you got to get it done in the first 2 years. I'm not saying it will get done, I'm saying you should get it done in the first 2 years.
Based on the opposition that EDCA is receiving right now from many quarters of society, professionals, so on and so forth, do you think there needs to be amendments? Do you think that there needs to be areas where the government should really relook at in terms of moving forward?
If anything, I think the government is keeling over too soon. I mean, if I was in the government, I would not advise them to give up Mode 4. I think Mode 4 is a useful instrument, particularly at this time. In today's, they should try actually negotiating with China. They'll learn some lessons. China doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility. It has been, anybody who has negotiated with China, China basically comes with a sort of comprehensive approach. The Indians are very much more flexible. So, I think that's going to be the case. They'll learn as they do, as the Indians have done. And I think they'll move forward. But I think, of course, you have to listen. But you have to listen to the unrepresented too. The people who will benefit, the plumbers, the people who will benefit from a growing economy, they are not heard. The people who are suffering from the poor quality of professional services that are provided by these protesting protectionists, they will not be heard. It's only these noisy protectionists who are heard. And you think that everybody is protesting? No. There are lots of people who haven't paid attention to this issue.
Thank you very much, Professor Rohan Samarjeva, Chair of Learn Asia. I'm now moving my attention to Mr. Rohan Maskorala, CEO of the Shippers Academy of Sri Lanka. Mr. Maskorala, the previous government had a vision for Sri Lanka. 2016, the Miracle of Asia was the vision that the previous government had. The present regime wants to make Sri Lanka a hub. Can this be done? Is it a realistic goal? We're talking about megapolis, we're talking about a financial city. Can all this be done really in a country like Sri Lanka? Now we're talking about EDCA, we're talking about trade agreements. It's all far too fetched. looks very elusive at the moment.
Well, you talked about the past government. There was what's called the 5-hub concept in the past government, including logistics, aviation, shipping, energy, education.
It was sure a miracle. Nothing was done.
That was the miracle of the hub. So I don't see a difference of that concept. The hub concept is still there because of our natural geographic location. We are definitely going to work towards a logistics hub, a shipping hub, aviation hub, distribution hub in the region, and that's the model that I have been promoting from my side, because I worked in Singapore. I've seen how these guys work. I have seen what happens in Dubai. We in fact brought in amendment in the last government's last year called the Commercial Hub Act, and already 5 or 6 companies have invested, and they are doing the regional distribution. The problem is there is not enough land. People are asking for land. Other companies are asking to come and set up in Sri Lanka. So we have those issues right now, land issues, things like that. So I don't see the concept of a hub is from that government or this government. It's moving forward. The differentiation here is that they are establishing a trade policy, and it is very important. As I said at the beginning, all this discussion is because it's with India. If we started something with China, we did start with China in 2012 or so. Mr. Veerathing would say that. Nobody talked about it. These discussions were never there. So if something is wrong. If we started with Singapore, nobody would have talked about it. It's because of India, because we have a trust issue. That's right. So we have to, the government has failed to market itself, I would say. That's what Mr. Veer is saying. It has not gone to the grassroots levels and explained what we are trying to do. So if we are not going to go into economic integration with India, I am sorry to say, we are the losers.
Mr. Maskorala, a few months ago, the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Ranil Wickremesinghe, addressing a group of individuals, the business community in Colombo, said that whatever happens, he will go ahead and sign the agreement. A very autocratic style adopted by the Prime Minister. And now suddenly they're saying about negotiation, they're talking about discussions. Where is the genuine interest to bring in good governance into play?
I was not listening to this conversation, but anyway, if he said that, maybe the style of his is that he wants to go ahead with this because he sees the benefits of this. Yeah, and of course, as he said, he has a mandate because he has told that he's going to negotiate with different countries for trade agreements. So if somebody has got a mandate for that, I don't think that he should be dilly-dallying with it. He should work towards it very fast. As he said, I fully agree that these things have to be done fast. Otherwise, it will become a political issue and you are not going to get anything implemented towards the latter stage of a government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rohan Maskorala, CEO of the Shippers Academy of Sri Lanka. I'm now moving my attention to Mr. Nalaka Jayavira, representing the UPM as well as the OPA. Am I right? Right. So, Mr. Jayavira, innovation is key. Free trade agreements are key if a country needs to move forward. However, you hold a different opinion. If that is the case, what should be the way forward? Let's put everything aside for the moment, and let's look at a few years from now. Where do you see Sri Lanka, and how do we achieve this target? How do you achieve this objective?
It's like this. Take the Indian National Trade Policy. Go and read it. It is in the net. Read the Vietnam Trade Policy. It is exactly specifies everything. It says what you are going to give and your limitations, everything is there. What we are saying is not to, we specifically say this is not against signing trade agreements. What we are saying is let us have our house in order. For if the government is committed to do that, I believe within 1 year we can complete. We can complete the whole balance work, maybe there for the last 15 years. But that commitment, that staff allocation, that resource allocation has to come. If that is there, we have offered the services. We have never asked for anything. We have done on honorary to date. Now the thing is, if we can do it, what we said 8 months ago, or almost 1 year ago, we would have within down the line 6 months we can sign many agreements. Now you were referring the Chinese agreement. We were few days ago, Mr. Veer Singh and myself as another forum, and I haven't seen, or not a single agency has seen, in terms of professionals, the Chinese agreement. Maybe because the Department of Commerce and the other people want to only to release the Indian agreement, not the Chinese agreement. So even if you ask the comments made on Chinese agreement, we haven't seen it. So this is what we are saying, the transparency and discussion, everything should be open. I am not asking to, as Professor Rohan Samarji says, it's not to go and meddle each and every clause. What the question is, overall framework. The Chinese agreement, they refer that it is going to be signed, nobody has seen it.
Maybe it's there on the website, but the website is not working, Mr. Veer Singh. Let's end this discussion today with Mr. KJ Veer Singh, advisor to the Agency for International Trade. Mr. Veer Singh, when will this document be signed, implemented? When will it be discussed? Does the government have a time frame?
Well, as I mentioned before, we had the first round of negotiations in August, and second round we had this last week. So it's almost just a month and a half we had the second round. So we are scheduling to meet hopefully in mid-November, maybe the next round. So we are moving. I think if one says that we are not moving fast, I think we are moving. So because we'll be having third round in November. So you cannot say, but of course the Indian minister also said that they don't want to rush it. We can move at our own comfort level. So we will be carefully moving, but it's a need to move fast, yes. But at the cautiously we need to move, take into account the stakeholders' concerns. We need to consult the stakeholders so that the process will go. So I cannot predict a date, but the government is keen towards the end of the year. If not, I think at least hopefully it can be maybe in the first quarter of next year, because we are also parallelly negotiating with Singapore, with China. We have had already 3 rounds of negotiations with China. And maybe in October another round will held with China. Singapore, we had 1 round, second round will be held towards the end of this month. So we are parallelly moving all 3 agreements. So there is a target, if possibly, all 3 agreements to be concluded in the first quarter of next year. That is what we are hoping to do. But of course, it may be not directly relevant. I think most of the debate today has been focused on this movement of natural persons, whether the professionals will be allowed to come. So I think to put in perspective this whole thing, I think I'll read just briefly a paragraph in the context of the agreement, which says this agreement shall not apply to the supply of services. This agreement shall not apply to measures affecting natural persons seeking access to the employment market of a party, nor shall it apply to measures regarding citizenship, residence or employment on a permanent basis. It's about temporary movement of natural persons, and that also on the mode 4 I have categorically said the first 3 will be open to discussion, but only what we are going to have restrictions is the independent movement of natural persons. Secondly, the text also says nothing in this agreement shall prevent a party from applying measures to regulate the entry of national persons of the other party into or their temporary stay in its territory, including those measures necessary to protect the integrity of and to ensure the orderly movement of natural persons across the border. So these are there already to regulate, right? Regulate is there. So therefore they need to unnecessarily worry about this movement of natural persons and the professionals flooding the market. And of course I admit there need to have certain legislative mechanisms. The regulatory mechanisms should be in place. Immigration policy, immigration is not directly related to the ITCA or the movement of that. So those need to be in place. So we recognize the special committee on regulatory mechanisms is working on it, and they will parallel the work and try to do as much as possible on
Thank you very
priority
much.
basis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Veerasinghe. So the two paragraphs that you read right now
Yeah.
was from the EDCA draft bill.
EFCA draft and is also part of, you know, in the GATS agreement in W2.
There's no need to worry.
Yes.
There's no need to worry.
Yes, there is no worry.
There's no need to worry, Mr. Veerasinghe, on the issues that you just mentioned
Yes,
right now.
there's no need to worry, yes.
So can I have that document before you go out of the studios?
I can give that page to you, yes.
The page only. Can I have the entire draft bill, Mr. Veerasinghe?
You know, certain chapters, yes, but we are in a working, it's a working draft. It is not the constant, now say what, 1 month ago this should have been not the same draft. I think we will be working on, it's not the, these are with, you know, the negotiated text being negotiated, it's evolving document.
Can I have a copy of the evolving document, Mr. Veerasinghe? I leave it at that. Thank you very much, Mr. KJ Veerasinghe, advisor to the Agents for International Trade, representing the government, for joining us this evening on the show. Thank you very much, Mr. Veerasinghe, again, for joining Face the Nation tonight. Professor Rohan Samarjiva, Chair of Learn Asia, Mr. Nalaka Jayavira, representing the OPA, as well as Mr. Rohan Maskorala, representing the Shippers Academy of Sri Lanka. He is the CEO. Thank you very much, Professor Samarjiva, as well as Mr. Maskorala, for joining us for the second time in the span of 2 to 3 months on the show. Thank you again, gentlemen, for joining us on Face the Nation. Thank you very much, Nadeem. Thank you very much, Chaturanga. Thank you very much, Zulfi, for joining us on the show. I leave you tonight with a quote. Someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. Will EDCA provide the shade needed for Sri Lankans? Will it benefit Sri Lanka in the long run? Only time will tell. Take care and good night.